Now, when I talk about agriculture, I talk about the agriculture that I have experienced 35 years now as a certified organic primary and tertiary producer in different sectors. Started with beef, sheep, wool, then olives, garlic and honey. Now, another way of describing my business is as a primary producer who sells wholesale but also manages a retail arm of the business. And I can tell you, being a retailer is not being a primary producer. And while 3,500 hectares is a pretty reasonable size for an agricultural business, Elmswood, that's the name of the property, is really an SME. And when I was thinking about my topic, Indigenous agriculture, I thought there may be many of you here who think, oh, again, a bit la. But I have to say that for me, it's hard. And often my throat seizes. So if it happens, please stick with me. Now, my mother, Mary Owens, gave birth to me at St Joseph's Women's Refuge in Adelaide. And from there, I was adopted and I lived with Thelma and Felix Newell and my foster brother, Paul, at Coralta Park in Adelaide. Adoption laws changed and adoptees were able to access more information, not much, but they could get their original birth certificate. Adoptees have the privilege of having two. So I then found out that my birth mother was Mary Owens and my original name was Susan Owens. Much later on, in fact, well into my adulthood, after I'd written 3 books on agriculture, I discovered that my mother, Mary Owens, was Aboriginal. Mary Owens was a Gundit Mara woman. Born in Warrnambool, her mother, my grandmother, was Maria Joanna Austin, born in Framlingham, the Western District's Aboriginal mission. And although stolen generation laws deprived me of experiencing my rich Aboriginal heritage growing up, I've been trying to make up for that loss. I did meet my mother's younger brother, Patrick. He's now passed away, but we did have a few good years of getting to know each other. And since then, many, many other Gundit Mara people who have never left country. And whenever I go down there, always open their arms to me. When my grandmother died, she only had 3 very young children. And they were sent off to the Catholic orphanages in Ballarat, and we've heard a lot about those orphanages in Ballarat, where, the paperwork's been destroyed. My mother there was trained to be a domestic, and she married a man, and she moved to a cattle station in Queensland until her husband was killed. Then she moved back to Fitzroy, and when she moved back there, not long after, she killed herself. I never got to meet my birth mother. So I want to thank you, Jenny, for providing me an opportunity today to speak as a person who's been farming, for over 3 decades and engaged in all these different sectors with different roles, different insights that you get from these different sectors. But now I farm with my ancestors watching me. So how did I come, even before I knew that, to be interested in agriculture? When we first spoke about this conference, I was immersed in talking about the important topics in my book, Who's Minding the Farm in this climate emergency. But now really, 2.5 years since we first spoke, I've been reflecting on my final stage in my agricultural journey and how that will take shape. Because as an Aboriginal woman and a land manager, I remain still very angry. I'm angrily struggling with the ongoing failure of national reconciliation, with the lack of constitutional recognition, and with, the contemptuous rejection of the Uluru Statement of the Heart. And then, of course, every now and then all these horrific events, like in May 2020, when Rio Tinto destroyed the caves at Junkun Gorge near their iron ore mine in the Pilbara, even though Rio Tinto actually had a reconciliation plan, an Aboriginal reconciliation plan. I farm with the knowledge that 1% of the agricultural workforce identify as Indigenous, only 1%. Now, most Aboriginal people that I've met, and I'm told living now, have not grown up on their country, on their ancestral land. So when someone says to me, oh, what a shame, Patrice, you're farming on Wanneroo country and you're not down there on Gunditjmara country, I realise there's this quite immovable barrier of white land ownership and the belief surrounding that. Lest we forget, is a national mantra. Lest we remember is really a more accurate one. And many Indigenous historians speak about the cult of disremembering or the Great Aussie Silence. Now, Reconciliation Action Plans, that program has been operating in Australia for 16 years. In fact, some of you in your profession may have actually participated in one, because learning the true history of Australia and finding ways to actually talk about it is at the heart of those plans. Before I came here, I rang to check whether there were any agricultural reconciliation plans operating at the moment. There had been some, and they said there weren't any. So the agricultural sector does not have Aboriginal reconciliation plans. We talk about black armband history. It should not be a pejorative, right? History is all our history. Otherwise, it's just racist propaganda. Now, when I arrived at Gundy in 1987, I asked the neighbours, who were the local Wanneroo people? And I was met with an embarrassing silence. And I heard most people said, well, there weren't ever many around anyway. Yeah. Well, they were. And in fact, I had a young girl work for me, and she'd been working for me for over 2 years before she told me she was Aboriginal. She's a Wanneroo girl. She was so shy and so hesitant to admit she was Aboriginal. She knew I was, and she couldn't say it in the group when we were working as a team. It blew me away. In 1983, the government set up Link Up. Now, this is a group to help Aboriginal people find their families. I reached out to this group last year, and on the day in Adelaide, when I was talking to them, I was trying to see if they could help me find some other relatives. People were walking in off the street, and then they'd stop and say, excuse me, I need to go and talk to this person. And these were people who walked in off the street trying to get help to find their family. This happens every day, every day. I couldn't believe it. And then the woman who was helping me came back and she said, you're the lucky one. You know who your mother is. You've met your brother, your uncle, her brother. So Indigenous knowledge, we think that it's broken. It might be broken, but it is not lost. And the Indigenous community's desire to gain more and share more and find more about their identity is happening clearly all the time, everywhere. I remember one of the first trips to Gunditjmara country. I'd caught a plane down and I'm driving from Melbourne across to Warrnambool. There's canola crops. It's all very pretty. I can see the chemical tracks, not happy. I know it's genetically engineered, not happy. But the general beauty of the place made me feel happy. And when I got to Warrnambool and saw my relatives, I said, oh, who are the farmers? Thinking we'll get an invitation and go and visit some farms in the Western District. Got friends who are farmers, and they said, I've never met a farmer. I said, you've never met a farmer? And that then went around and me asking, have you met a farmer? My Aboriginal friends, relatives in Warrnambool, in Gunditjmara land, have not met farmers, right? The Western District agricultural sector was set up when they shoved all the Aboriginal people into the mission and have clearly not developed a relationship with the people there now. So that trip, right, I'm sure there are individuals in places, but as a rule, that was a pretty mind-boggling thing. But it didn't matter that I didn't get to a farm in the Western District, because on that trip, we travelled further west and we went to the Budgebim cultural landscape. Now, this is an area that in 2019 became a World Heritage Area. And there, for the very, very first time in my entire agricultural life, I felt like a proud Australian. I was a proud Gunditjmara woman. I had, in that minute, I stepped on that land, that place, Budge Bim, an instant awakening to my epigenetic connection. All that DNA in me, right, came to life, because here before me was a 6,000-year-old Gunditjmara eel aquaculture system. It's not a small gully repair work. It's not some $1 million grant with a bit of, work done. No, this was a fully integrated system of catchment management around Lake Condah. Ancient eel traps were managing water, supplying food in this absolute resource-rich area. There are remains of rock huts, remains of rock walls, revealing this very complex managerial system. So I said to myself, was this why I was interested in water reform? Somewhere back in there. Why did I care? Yeah. This was an example of what can be achieved with thousands of years of care for land. A system that worked, that this was, I think, what we would call sustainable. This is proof of an idea. Often when we see some environmental work done, you go, yeah, it's okay for the minute. Am I going to be around in 30 years to see that it still holds? But when you look at this at Budge Bim, you think this is proof of an idea and what you can really, really achieve when you respect landscape. And this is Aboriginal. Now, it doesn't matter to me where people come from, or I would think that, being adopted. But what really, really matters is that you treat the land with respect. This earth on which we stand, treading that land with respect is equal to treating a person, treating a community with respect. And that respect is the foundation of Indigenous agriculture to me. So we have these shining examples. I've just told you about one in my country, in Gunditjmara land. But the issue is for all the different Aboriginal nations across Australia, who all have their own unique places that are special. How do you facilitate better Aboriginal Indigenous participation in agriculture? Because we've got a few choices, government-led, private-led. It has to be, to me, Indigenous-led. I reflect on the fabulous work one of my heroines, notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, mighty person, law in America, fighting for equality for women. She's a lawyer. She has a canvas, the law. Yeah? A politician has a canvas, government. Charities have all their groups. A farmer, yeah? We've got a farm. But what does a dispossessed Indigenous person have when you've taken away their land? So think about it. It's very hard to find your canvas when you've had your canvas taken away. Now, I was asked recently to speak at a local meeting as an Aboriginal woman, and tick 2 boxes there. And I said, I'll think about it. And I put the phone down. I was in the garlic shed and I turned around and the group knew the person. It was a local person. I said, blah, blah, rang and wants me to speak. And I said, I'm not sure he or that group really want to hear from a woman. And without missing a beat, the guy said, don't go. Waste of time. They don't want to hear it from a woman. Right? Now, sort of part of me was like, But on the other hand, I thought, you speak the truth. You just spoke the truth. And I said no. But when I said no, I felt silenced. Yeah. I wanted to speak up about the alarming agricultural trajectory that I see, pushing for bigger agriculture. It's not enough to have a $62 billion industry. Now we have to have a $100 billion industry, even though we haven't fixed up what we've done with the $62 billion industry. So the market, it speaks pretty well on price, but it does not speak Indigenous knowledge. It does not place value on 60,000 years of land protection. It doesn't recognise cultural diversity, and nor does it demand inclusion. Now, I farm along an unregulated river. It's called the Pages, and that's where a river, unregulated, no dam on the top. It's part of the Hunter River system, and right below my house, the Pages River meets the Isis River. And in 1901, the New South Wales Department of Lands recorded 100 carved trees there. So when I say 100 carved trees, I think you'd probably think that was probably a place of some significance, yeah? So they recorded it, so they obviously sort of that it was worth something. By 1929, so 30 years after they were recorded, the last tree fell in a flood. And that is from correspondence we had with previous owners who remember the last carved tree falling into the river. Now, we're in the second water sharing plan right now. So we've just had one for 10 years. Last week, I went to New South Wales local meeting with our water sharing plan to talk about this one. This one has in it, it's a water entitlement to Aboriginal people. Right? There was never any water entitlement to Aboriginal people in the first water sharing plan, except this is only water at high flow. And if you're going to get it, you have to build all this infrastructure. So Aboriginal people, yeah, who used to have, where the Pages meets the Isis, this major ceremonial, are now, thanks government, entitled to have some water, maybe, if we think fit, on high flow. So I think, you know, we've already over-allocated that system. Some people complained at that meeting that there wasn't enough water anyway for them. So these, to me, are the conversations on the ground that remain pretty ugly. Many leaders speak. Is that 2 more minutes to go? Okay. I have to tell you one quick thing. And I only found this out last year. And please look up here Lorraine Marrimore, because she helped me a year ago on she does Aboriginal Healing. And it's not just for Aboriginal people, it's also for white people that are trying to understand really what's been going on, the emotional impact, and why I often can't speak. I'm proud of myself. I had some help earlier that I could speak today. But she told me, Auntie Lorraine told me, and I'm interested in this because my mother went and worked on a cattle station in Queensland, that in 1920 it was revealed that 95% of the young girls working as domestic servants on Queensland cattle stations left pregnant to go back to the mission. And as a woman now in agriculture and aware of the epigenetic impact of trauma and the intergenerational trauma that all Aboriginal people feel, and women and their problem dealing with rape and then unwanted pregnancies, living in missions, and how they were then forced to go back to their missions where they had their baby taken away from them and then sent to go back to another place to be a domestic. And these are the stories of our pioneering history that are not told. And to me, they were really important because those girls, they were absolutely in demand to be domestics on all those stations. So I feel I've had it easy. In reconciliation first, as I say, and we'll get better at land management when we have better reconciliation. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you. That was absolutely wonderful and very moving. Much to think about and to be done.
If I can ask a question.
Yes, just so got 10 minutes, or actually about 8, I've been told, but let's just go with the flow. First question here, and then if you could indicate to me in the usual way if you'd like to follow up with your question. Thank you.
Lorraine, thank you. Sorry. Do I call you Susan?
Patrice.
Yeah.
Sorry, Barbara. The canvas of First People is allodium. Allodium is something that I had the good fortune to establish in 2016, the allodial title of all First People around the world, with the legal precedent of allodial title, published in the Commonwealth Law Bulletin in 2019.
Okay.
The entitlement of all First People is to everything below the ground to the core of the earth and everything above the earth to the stars. All of the minerals, all of the water, all the microorganisms, it's all there. And that's your right at law. At law, that nobody can deny. The Commonwealth Law Bulletin is an instruction from the Crown to the judiciary of the world of the Commonwealth.
See, you say that and I think of the little girl working for me and how that doesn't empower her.
Yes.
And making that leap where you feel you are. Yeah.
And it's something that I have to ask, and that how many people in this room have done a cultural competency audit? Raise your hand.
Training.
Maybe 2 people, 3 people.
Mm.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the question and the conversation. Now, a couple of more questions, please. We've got time. Yes, over here, please. If you could come to the microphone, that'd be good. Oh, sorry, Jenny. I was thinking of Jenny as the supreme organiser rather than organising me. So please, Jenny.
I'm an inveterate question asker. Patrice, aka Susan. There's been controversy about Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu. You talk about the Aboriginal Indigenous care of the land for 60,000 years, which I accept, but can you, without treading on any toes unduly, can you comment on to what extent did Aborigines develop agriculture per se? Or was it just I mean, we know about fish traps and there was clearly management, but to what extent would you have called it agriculture?
Yes, tough questions.
I don't know. I know that answer. I suppose it's a question that's asked where you're comparing it to the agriculture we know. And just about every Aboriginal person I ever talked to about it always thought, why do we think that was the system? What a wreck, what a train wreck agriculture is. Hey, we're not that. So I think working within the systems is being foundational, because it would have been a really more abused place when the British came. So I probably don't, in my mind, see it as agriculture. I see it as land management, care on a deep spiritual level. Yeah.
Thank you. Caring for country. And you're next, and then you're next. Yes, thank you.
Cowley, I'm a journalist by profession. I make films to instigate change in the agricultural, sustainable area. But I've had the fortune over the last 3 or 4 years of meeting many wonderful Indigenous Australians, and I haven't done what did you call it? No, but I have listened, I have tried to learn, and I have stayed quiet. And I wanted to thank you for sharing what you have, but I wanted to ask you, the many different land managers that I interview, I ask them, do you have any connection or conversation with your traditional owners? And often the answer is always no. They would like to. How do we start practical reconciliation when it comes to healing people and the land?
So there's two, it's a big question too. There's 2 things. that get said to me. One is, okay, here's white agriculture. Oh, now you want me, Aboriginal, you're asking me, Aboriginal person, to come over here and give you a few tips on how to do it better, right? White culture is the dominant culture. There's not a lot of excitement about doing that. And I think part of that reason, and then a lot of white farmers have said to me, well, they don't know anything anyway, really, Patrice. They've been off the land, they're living in that. No, there's a lot of that has been said. But the thing that's been really shocking to me is that we just don't have relationships, with white and Indigenous people still do not have friendships, really, not real relationships. And I think that's where it's got to start. You got to find them. And I say, it might be awkward, just like a first date. Yeah, they're likely to be awkward when you start that relationship, but it's worth persevering because we have to do better and share. Yeah.
There are other questions, but I've been advised there's only time for one more. So.
Hi, Nicole Charmer here. I'm going to be speaking at the end of the conference, but this is a bit of a plug for my book as well, but I think I do answer some of the question about how you can regard Indigenous land management. I actually coined the term eco-farming. So I did most of my research my book is based on my PhD that I did in Esperance in Western Australia, and it's based on how people manage food systems through time. And so it included prehistory and talking to a lot of Indigenous people who live in the district. And I think that we have become wrapped up in the idea that farming involves tremendous interference and changes that you have to do, and cultivation and all that sort of thing that you have to do to call it agriculture. I've sort of taken the approach that the management was so intense and ongoing, 365 days a year, looking after country, that what people were doing was a closely integrated system of farming, or if you want to call it that, using ecological principles. So they actually had worked out over thousands of generations how to manage country and land and animals, plants, probably less so in waterways or coastal waterways, but to maintain systems that continued on and on and on. And to me, that is what sustainability is. It has to be thousands of years.
Thank you. We look forward to your session tomorrow and your book. It must be out here as well.
It's not.
Yeah. Oh, well.
CSIRO. Down with CSIRO.
Thank you.
They only sent 2 books.
Can you join with me in thanking Patrice? Such an important and fundamental issue, and really delighted to have you share your expertise and knowledge and personal experience. Our next speaker is Matthew Evans. Where are you, Matthew? Could you come and join us, please?